Welcome back to the Transform Your Mind to Transform Your Life radio hour and podcast. I'm your host, Life Coach Marina Young, and sitting in the guest chair today is Matt Zinman. Matt is a podcast host and the author of Z-isms, Insight to Live By. And we're going to be talking on the topic today, using Z-isms in life lessons for personal growth. Welcome, Matt.
Hey, Coach Myrna. I'm so looking forward to the conversation. It's great to be with you.
Yeah, I love that radio voice. Nice. Bring it on. All right. Yes. Well, I'm going to enjoy our conversation today too. Just before I tell you a little bit more about Matt, um, life lessons can be defined as something which useful knowledge or principles can be learned. When I was growing up, my grandmother had a lot of these sayings and principles. One of them that I always tell my kids is, you can lead a horse to the water, but you can never make it drink. So, I didn't ask Math about the definition of Z-isms. We're going to talk about that later. But, when I researched the topic, they talked about Z-isms being life lessons. So I thought, my grandmother was great at all the life lessons and all the sayings. So if you don't know what a Z-ism is, then stick around because we're going to be talking about that today. Awesome. So, again, let me give you some more information on Matt. Matt Zinman is a difference maker devoted to personally enriching the lives of at least 100 million people by 2025. His book, Z-isms, Insight to Live By, is based on his experiences as an entrepreneur, athlete, single parent, caregiver, and nonprofit founder. Matt is also the host of Insights to Live By, a podcast that invites guests to share their own pearls of wisdom. In addition, Matt is the CEO of the Internship Institute, which he established in 2007 to make experience matter. All right.
Wow.
Love your goal of reaching the lives of at least 100 million people by 2025. I will tell you that my goal is not as specific, but I do the show because I also want to transform the lives and enrich the lives of the people that listen to my show. So, welcome again.
Thank you.
All right, you're welcome. All right. Well, one of the first questions I have here is, I didn't mention it in your bio, but when I was reading your story, you talked about dealing with depression after losing your brother. So I'm thinking that that might have been the trampoline that, made you write your book. So can you share your story and how your story and depression and losing your brother, transitioned into you writing your book?
Absolutely. Well, depression, first I'll say that in writing a book involving personal growth and development, it's written in a format of kind of having a personal conversation with the reader, and felt it was important in sharing different anecdotes and that personal side of me and my life, that I really just wanted to put myself out there, including the fact that I have had to contend with depression actually since my early teens. I didn't exactly inherit the best gene pool, Myrna, and my
Oh,
dad was bipolar and my
oh, you're
mom was a depressive, and I don't know that I really quite realized it at the time until really my early 20s, but upon reflection that it had been affecting me that much. And it's certainly been a defining part of my life, especially in how I need to take care of myself and be proactive. And I've had my bouts with it over the years, and what it takes to get out of it. Mentioning my brother Dave, he too, with the same gene pool, had his struggles, and in 2012 he succumbed to them. And
mm,
so that is certainly part of what led to that aspect of the book. I mean, certainly mood health is just, one of many more chapters, but I think especially now it's been very important to be leaning in and having these conversations, because so many people are are dealing with this, whether it's more genetic or life circumstances.
Yeah, yeah. So, your brother committed suicide?
He did.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is very, very, very hard thing to deal with. And I'm assuming that he was young too.
Yeah. He was 49
Oh,
at the
okay.
time. And,
Okay.
it was a combination of things. He actually was also contending with opioids, and he had had a work injury that,
Mhm.
led to him getting into those. And, the combination, and usually it is a combination of things, that is what comes into play. And, on the practical side of it, I talk about things like the 3-day rule, because when it comes to depression, it really is, and anyone who's experienced it, I think everyone has experienced it in one form or another,
Yeah.
is that it's like sinking into quicksand. And the longer that you allow yourself to be depressed, the harder it is to get out. And for me, I know, just as with anyone in life, you're going to have a down day. You're going to get punched in the gut as an entrepreneur a few times a week, is probably the average. And
Not many, huh?
yeah, that many. You kick one place or another. Uh, but the point is that if I get to that third day, I know I have to be proactive. I have to do something physical. I have to create structure for myself, especially. I can't lay around. I do the things that lift me up. I reach out to people
Hmm.
who do that for me. And a lot of this is our coping skills, but it's so easy to isolate. And then the next thing you know, you've sunk in that much deeper, and it is that harder, much harder to get out. And then in that chapter on mood health is something called the mood scale. And
Mm.
essentially, it's kind of like a thermometer, and it's got that range of, you could say, happy, sad, in terms of that normal range, whatever normal is, however you define it.
Yeah.
But what it's like when you start getting mild depressed or moderate or severely depressed
Right.
down the scale. And of course, someone who might be bipolar, that then takes you into the escalation or elevation around hypomania, mania, and
Right.
psychosis. So I'm not a doctor. I don't even play one on television, but certainly through the experience of it, I think there's a lot to be said for there being no substitute for it, and what I've had to do to and do continue to do to manage it.
Okay. So, you decided to write the book, because of the story of your brother. Um, and yeah, you said you didn't inherit that great of a gene pool because you both you and your brother, got the mental health issue from your parents, which, it is hereditary. Okay, all right. So, one of the chapters in your book is about mood health, and I know this your situation, your situation with depression, and your brother probably allowed you give you the information for this particular topic. But before we get there, can you tell us what is a Z-ism?
Sure. Well, you started to hit it quite directly earlier. It
Okay.
really are those pearls of wisdom and life lessons, by any other name, right?
Right, right, right.
Credos, mantras, adages. What are those things that we impart to others? We all have them, whether it's from your grandmother, which that's a very good one, by the way, in terms of the horse to water and
I know,
drinking
I
it.
say it all the time.
Yeah, yeah. Especially as a coach, I'm sure that you can relate. Um, and the mood health is certainly just one aspect of the book. The book is something I've been wanting to do for at least 15 years, and roots back into a number of different life experiences and concepts that I've found very helpful in my ongoing life challenges. Things like around earned confidence, which is something we'll get into,
Hmm.
having to do with self discovery and mindset and staying present, but certainly also into things around personal interactions and relationships, getting into areas around harnessing gratitude and amplifying awareness and mindfulness, in part around the law of attraction. But another the main thing for me is I want the reader to come out with some kind of practical framework for life enrichment and personal improvement. So there's this life enrichment action plan, this LEAP, that is the culmination of the book for people to come away from all these different concepts, some of which I'm starting to mention, so they can put them into practice.
I love that. So you said life enrichment action plan. What was the other one?
Earned confidence. Is that
Okay. All right. Yes. Yes. So I love that life enrichment action plan. I love that tagline. All right. So yeah. So you talk about mood health, and the earn confidences and relationships. So do you start off a chapter by saying something like what I just said, like a principle, and then you dive into some explanation? Is that basically how it's written?
To a degree, I mean, when people think of isms, right,
Right.
the same thing as the bring the horse to water and drinking, they think of quips and quotes, and certainly there are
Right.
call outs throughout the book. But the book,
Okay.
it's a narrative, and
Okay.
earned confidence is certainly that grounding principle. So if I may, I'll take a moment about that,
Okay.
um, which is also in this like Z-ism, something that we all have. We've all been through everything we have in our lives, and we're survivors, right? We're still standing.
Hmm.
And so people think, well, I want to get confidence, but earned confidence is something that you've gained through the very fact that that you can deal with things in real time. You always get to the other side of them. And it's a reminder that you don't have to worry. You don't have to make assumptions or be anxious about things that are in the future that are uncertain to happen. You can just deal with the real. And it also is grounded in and around gratitude and staying present. So that also points back to regrets, resentments, things
Hmm.
around shame and guilt, things that are from that baggage from the past that are maybe weighing you down, and how do you let them go? And then certainly in and around at the heart of it is about kindness. And when people think of kindness, the first thought is that it's toward others. And here
Hmm.
we're specifically talking about self-kindness. And
Hmm.
the reason is that when we are at the very foundation of personal improvement, and we're striving for things around self-esteem and self-love, and I know that I want to feel that way about myself, but it can be very vague. How do you get your arms around, okay, now I feel self-love? But if you approach everything from a foundation of self-kindness, it really is a this or that. You're either being kind to yourself or you're not.
Or you're not. True.
So that's really a good barometer as that guiding principle to know that you're on the right track when it comes to building your self-esteem, working toward improving and deepening your self-love. So the operative question is, well, why be anything less than kind to yourself? And that hopefully is an obvious answer for
Right. But
everyone.
we all know self-love, self-love and self-care can go hand in hand. But explain to our listeners, because I personally am not I don't actually get it right now as I'm thinking about it. What is self-kindness?
Well, I mean, there's any number of circumstances that come into play. So if
Okay.
you are somebody, for example, who has a hard time saying no, and you know who you are, because you're literally saying, I really need to say no more often, right? Because people who are like that recognize that they may be taken advantage of. And that gets into the area around spiders, right? I know we'll be
Yeah, I
talking
know. I
uh,
can't wait for that one.
about that. But if you're in that moment
Hmm.
and you have a life decision to make, someone is taking advantage of you. They know that you're somebody who might say yes to something that you really
Mm.
should say no to. That's when
Okay.
you can ground yourself and ask, well, would it be kind to myself to say
Okay.
yes? Because if you don't, then you're dealing with that double hit of I really should say no. Now I didn't say no. Now I have to do the thing I didn't say no to. And
Yes.
that really hits your self esteem. So if you go back to that moment and you really consider, what does it mean to say no? I really have a lot of, Myrna, I understand that, this is something important to you. I'd love to help you, but I really have other priorities right now that I have to stay focused on, and maybe another time. Right.
Yeah.
Boom. What are you going to say? So,
Yeah.
you know, that's
Well, somebody
that's
will respect you for saying that, to be quite honest, because
right.
you're right. If someone knows that you have a hard time saying no, then they are going to take advantage of you. And as you were talking, I remember, that a lot of people are pleasers and they want people to like them. And that's why they have a hard time saying no, because they want to please. So it's quite a step to sit back and say, hey, you know what? I need to be kind to myself. If I take on this task, then I'm not going to be able to do this. I'm not going to be able to maybe get home and do this or whatever. But yeah, I mean, life enrichment action plan. I love that. That's definitely self kindness would definitely be part of your life enrichment action plan, because once you start being kind to yourself, then the whole world opens up. You know what I mean? So that's actually pretty good. I get it. I mean, in the beginning, because I'm so focused on self love and self care, I actually never actually heard self kindness. So I'm glad I I'm glad I expanded it so that we can explain. So awesome.
Yeah, it really is at the heart of things. And,
Hmm.
to your point about being a people pleaser, the opposite is true in terms of the experience of saying no. Well, I just want to be a people pleaser. But then when you step up in and around that self kindness in that example, and you do say no, as opposed to how badly you would feel by saying yes,
Yeah,
then you start to feel that self esteem. Then you can
yeah,
you can feel proud of yourself that you
yeah,
actually did the right thing.
yeah,
So it has that positive effect, just the same as bad as it would be if you said yes to something you should not
yeah,
have.
yeah, for sure. Because after you said yes, then you sit around and you beat yourself up for saying for saying yes, especially when you wanted to say no. So
Exactly.
yeah, I got it. Awesome. All right. So one of your life lessons talks about self-discovery and mindset. And of course, I love the mindset part of it. This is the, a show on mindset. So what are some Z-isms, or one of them that you can share with us that has to do with self-discovery and mindset?
Sure. Well, I think that we've made some great progress already in the conversation about some
Okay.
of the things that you could consider to be filters in how it is that we experience the world around us. So, one of the which is being mood health. And I think
Okay.
everyone recognizes that pessimism and optimism apply to the very same set of circumstances. And if you're having that kind of a down day, you could just as well be seeing something differently if you were having an up day. So recognizing where you are in your mood health at any given time is one filter all by itself.
Okay.
Certainly, earned confidence, again, as that grounding principle, is another. Are you staying present versus being caught up in the things that are maybe you're worrying about something that isn't certain to happen, or you keep running something through your head that already happened that continues to just spiral and drag you down. So that's another filter. And it's important to recognize that you are in the present, and grounding yourself in gratitude is very key. And then, of course, there's perception itself, and recognizing that you may not get it all right. We're not all the best listeners all the time. We could be distracted in
Mhm.
any given moment in our exchanges with someone. Now, now that we're talking about interactions there, but here, if you're talking about mindset within yourself, especially when again you're in some kind of, I don't know if crisis is, it doesn't always have to be a crisis, but it's important to recognize that we have all of these different moving parts all of the time, and that there is the opportunity to really step back and take what uh, is described in the book as a perception snapshot. There's a physical tool in the book, and it's easy enough to envision, where you're just breaking out one at a time. Are my basic life needs met? Am I healthy? Are those around me who I love healthy? And then you can go down to finances, your job, your relationships, on and on. And if you really step back and then you look to the right of that and you say, well, positive or negative, right? At any given time, take that snapshot. If you can say that your basic life needs are met and you're generally healthy, I mean, everything else is really more circumstantial. And again, going back to that earned confidence, recognizing that as bad as something may seem, if you're depressed, even, or if you're having a challenge financially, you, you may not even have the answer, but you know that you've already always found the answer before and you will find that answer again. So recognizing that this is just one thing that's over in the negative column that you may need to focus on, but by and large, everything's okay. So it's really important in terms of all of those filters to run yourself through and recognize really where you are in relation to your health and staying present and how you're perceiving the world around you at any given time.
So the mindset part of it is just, I like your snapshot, perception, because, you can always go all the way to the left, all the way to the right. But if you stay in the middle, and, you know, you're able to take a snapshot and say, hey, you know what? My basic needs are being met. Maybe I'm having some problem finances, but I'm healthy or stuff like that. So is that what you're talking about um, as far as the mindset shift?
Yeah,
I'm assuming.
precisely. Yeah.
Right.
Again,
Right.
because our perception, I mean, can change, dramatically through a day. One
Right.
part of the day you wake up and you're just ho hum, and then later on, you'll say you work out, right? And then you suddenly, you've got higher energy, and you're like, everything's really okay.
Mm-hmm.
So just recognize that at any given time when you're feeling a certain way, it's okay just to step back and really take a fresh look at things and recognize that however temporary it is, um, it is.
Okay. So you share stories, or you said you're having a conversation. It's a conversational book. So how do you coach them through that?
Well, there are a number of things that I speak to around, if we go back to earn confidence, what are those formative life experiences?
Mm-hmm.
And by that, I mean, not necessarily when you're a child, but, into your mid to late 20s until you get to the point where you're a fully formed adult. What are the
Right.
things that you can point back to that you had to contend with that you really can base your confidence on? And uh,
Got you.
so
Got you.
for me, one
Mm-hmm.
of them, and talk about the reference to athlete. I'm an ice hockey player, and I've played competitively since I was very young.
Mm-hmm.
And at that point, when I was 8, I took a hockey puck in the face, and I broke my jaw in 3
Mm-hmm.
places. And I think a lot of people would have quit at that point.
Mm-hmm.
And I was in the hospital, and my jaw is wired shut. I was a mess, and my poor mom. And I was
Yeah.
visited by, at the time, Bobby Clark, who was the captain of the Philadelphia Flyers. I'm based in Philadelphia, basically my childhood hero. And they'd
Mm-hmm.
won the Stanley Cup that year and everything. And he came and he sat with me, and we talked about the love of the game, and he encouraged me to keep playing.
Yeah.
And, it is kind of back to that get back on the horse
Right.
kind
Right.
of
Right. Right.
scenario.
Mm-hmm.
And of course I did. And then I look back at the common thread of ice hockey being so much that, that root in my life, that pure joy around my friendships and the experiences that I've had. And I played in the Team USA system. I was captain of Temple University, and I still play, in
Nice.
my 50s. Um, it's more beer
Nice.
league now, right? But
Right.
that resilience,
Mm-hmm.
that, going, so everyone really has those unique experiences that they can, if they reflect, point back to, and again ground them in that earned confidence, for them to recognize that, they have that already.
I'm smiling because I remember something that my pastor had talked on and preached on way back, and he called it your book of wars, right? And I started creating one that you can put in your the wars that you've won. Do you know what I mean? And it's actually a good thing to do, because similar to remembering when you wanted to quit because your jaw was broken and you got a puck in the face, and you stayed in the game and escalated it to something really good, right? It's the same thing. When you reach back to maybe a time when you want to quit, you remember that story, and you remember that, and so that's one of the ones that you won. It's almost the same thing. Your book of wars, and it actually, it's in the Bible, and that's why the pastor talked about it and talked about, because we all need to when we're feeling down, you know um think about, you keep talking about the earned confidence, but if you can reach back into your past for a victory, then you actually feel better. Even gratitude is the same thing. A lot of people start their mornings with a gratitude meditation, because if you're grateful for the smallest amount of things, it doesn't have to be that your dream is happening, because we all have goals and we all have dreams. And um, uh, you might be depressed because you're not where you want to be in life. But if you can just be grateful, then everything changes. Your mood changes. You can't be mad at your husband because you're grateful that you have a husband or a wife or something like that. So it's great. And I remember Lewis Hayes. She has a gratitude meditation that I do once in a while, but it's really basic. It's like being grateful that you have light and you have a stove that you can cook on, and you have indoor plumbing.
Right.
I mean,
Fresh water.
something, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, water. I mean, it is not anything big. There's so many things that we can be grateful for. So yeah, so that's pretty good. Your perception snapshot. You're leaving a lot of nuggets. They're, Oprah would call them tweetable, moments, tweetable sayings. So that's great. Yeah.
Yeah, and your point about gratitude is so spot on.
Mhm.
I'm right. We hear about it so much, and there's a reason. I mean, gratitude works, and it's really at that heart of life enrichment. And just as all these things that we're talking about, it's also a habit. And if I really love how you talked about, and just to remind anyone who's listening who really isn't into it yet, is to do that gratitude exercise, just 2 minutes, right, in the morning, and
Yeah,
have it be the last thing you do before bed. And if you do that for 30 days straight, I guarantee it will change your life.
it's true.
Be consistent. It's one
Especially if
thing to
you're
remember to do it.
especially if you're a negative person, it will
Right,
change you.
right,
Yep.
precisely.
Mhm. Yeah, pretty good. All right. So now I want to ask you the question about these spiders. It's an interesting, it's an interesting name. Like you love these great names. I love it. So again, one of your unusual topics in your book involves being aware of spiders,
Right.
and you describe spiders as people who manipulate and drain others. I guess like that person that knows that you can't say no, so they're gonna use that to their advantage. So now, why I'm curious about this topic is, first, yeah, how can our listeners be aware of these spiders? But my curiosity comes from, why did you call them spiders? Because I call those people leeches. So, because they suck you. Now,
Right.
what do spiders have to do with draining you?
Right. Well,
Tell me the concept.
that's they do. They have quite the bite.
Okay.
There's some hard living here.
Okay.
And interestingly, it's actually something I almost did not include in the book, because it's more of a cautionary chapter, right? Which one of these is not like the other? And this would be that chapter.
Mm,
And when we're talking about personal relationships and interactions, again, even in and around mindset, we have so many moving parts about ourselves. And then there's the whole challenge of sizing people up. So you're looking for, well, what are those things about someone else that are not moving parts? What, again, is a this or that, right? Just like kindness, being kind to yourself or you're not. Someone who is a manipulator that's a conscious effort someone makes. You're either a manipulator
Or
or
you're
you're
not.
not.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. Yeah.
so now it's not to say anybody who is that way is a terrible person. It could, things are a matter of degree. It could be just something that someone feels they need to do as a survival instinct in a politically charged office environment, right? Where they have to just kind of fend for themselves, but they would never be consciously manipulative toward people that they love,
Mm-hmm.
or just generally being a good person. So these things do happen to a degree, but if you really take inventory of the people who are in your orbit, it's pretty easy to go down that list and I think most people I talk to find it easy, right, to recognize that person is that way or that person is not that way. And for those of us who are not that way, we choose to be vulnerable. We don't want to put energy into having to be on guard all the time. That's the trade-off. It takes a lot more energy to be devious than it does to be oblivious, right? One of the
Yeah.
Z-isms for you,
Yeah. Yeah. And
as it
you got to
applies
remember
here.
what you do too. You've got to have a good memory when you're living the life of a manipulator, devious person, because it doesn't come naturally. You've got to plan it out.
That's right. That's
That's
right.
right.
And even though, again, you don't want to be always feeling, if a non-spider, that you have to always be on guard, it is important to recognize who those people are and in what circumstances do you need to really kind of tune on those spider senses, right? To recognize that someone, back to the example of trying to get you to do something where they feel you are a people pleaser, that
Mm-hmm.
that you should say no.
Mm-hmm.
And how do you handle that, and how it is that we described with saying no. But
Okay.
the spider chapter, I mean, there are just a
Now,
number of,
why did so you call them spiders because they suck? Is that the reason?
well, because they're devious. Because
Devious.
they're
Okay.
devious.
All
Because
right. Mm-hmm.
they weave webs, they set traps
Ah,
for
got
you.
you. Got you.
How do you avoid those webs? That's really where the metaphor comes in. Now, to your point, you could say leeches. You could say, but someone who's I think it's a little different, right? We all have our perceptions around this. Um, yeah, I guess leeches, to what you're describing, can be a spider in their own right. But then you have people who are more energy vampires, right? Have you heard that
I've
one?
heard that term. Yes.
And
Yes.
that's not necessarily something that someone is doing intentionally. They may not be going out of their way to be manipulative, but they're just very needy people who were just, again, back to the self valuing, about being kind to yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And the same thing goes back to relationships, be it romantic or personal, and otherwise. Is this a person in my life who is feeding me or draining me?
Yeah.
And we all go through the things that we do in life. We lean on each other. That's what
Yeah.
friendships and being
Yeah.
our loved ones are about. But if it's just this constant, then you really need to take a closer look at that person and whether they belong in your inner circle.
Yeah. Good. I like. So when I was thinking of draining, and again, different cultures here, but my culture would be, someone drain you, they're sucking the life out of you, they're draining your energy. You know what I mean? So there's like their energy vampire thing, but you actually meant that a spider is going to spin a web and set traps for you. Totally different thing that I was thinking. And the manipulative part. So how do you coach in that? What are some, or a Z-ism, that if someone finds themselves in the web of someone's manipulation, there is a video, an audio that I listened to, that it was incredibly powerful. And I listened to a message, a spiritual message, and I actually bought that. I bought the audio because it was so profound. And the minister was talking about that when you get into a spider's web, you actually can't get out. It's built in such a way that you can't get out when you're caught in a spider's web. So how do you what kind of Z-isms, or how do you coach in that? Do you give it an example of being caught in a manipulative web?
Right. I think it's a good point that your pastor makes, and yet at the same time,
Mm-hmm.
I don't necessarily know that that's going to be case by case, right? That's going to be
Right.
circumstantial,
Well,
and
I mean,
we
a real spider's
a
web.
real
I mean, but
spider's web.
obviously, we're using that as an analogy. Right,
Yes,
right, right.
of
Mm-hmm.
course. But you do get out of it. And, there's ways that you can avoid it. Again, back to whether I should say no or not. But,
Mm-hmm.
it does come back to self kindness. It comes back to valuing yourself. And if you value yourself first, the rest comes naturally.
Right.
And I think that while when it is in how we live our lives, again, back to the non spiders, uh, better to be oblivious because we don't want to be putting energy into being on guard all the time. And we will get snagged. That will happen when
Mm-hmm.
we do let our guard down or we don't bring it up. But then what's your fallback position? How do you get out? And again, that's going to be case by case, but still relying on that guiding principle around self kindness. You just can't go
Okay.
wrong. So I think
Okay.
self kindness is the escape hatch, if you
Okay.
will, to being caught in a web.
Okay. So what you're saying is that we are always in control, right?
Well, I think we're in control
Mm-hmm.
when we yes and no. I mean, you're not in control when you might have let your guard down and you're caught up. But then once you recognize it, once you
Right.
you really comes into your conscious, um, your conscious awareness. Yes,
Yes. Yeah.
that's when
Yeah.
you're
You
in
are in
control.
control. So I like that. So yes, if you get yourself caught in a spider's web and you're being manipulated, know that if you think about you and think of yourselves and think about the wars that you've won and gratitude or all the things that Matt's talking about, then you have the power to change the situation. That's what I meant about self control. Right. Okay. So in the beginning of our conversation, you actually did tell us um, what somebody will get from the book after they've read it. But maybe you can talk on that again.
Sure.
So tell us about your book, Z-isms, Insights to Live By. And when someone finishes reading your book, what is the message that you want them to walk away with?
Great. Thank you. Well, for one, I thought about this quite a bit since the book has come out, and you never know, right? When you write a book, and how does it stand apart? And one of the things that I realized, of course, I'm I swear I mentioned the personal development books when my late 20s, my early 30s, and my early 50s now. And I
Mhm.
can't claim to say that I consume a ton of these books. I'm running a nonprofit and raising a family, all of those things, which is to say that I kind of wrote it in a bit of a vacuum, right? A little bit of the bubble of
Mhm.
reflections through my own experiences. Some of the things we've talked about, we've all been through the ringer, but I certainly have my own share of it and things that we don't and have entire time to get to, but have really taught me a lot about a lot of what we've talked about, and I felt it was really important. Again, back to things around earned confidence, the being aware of spiders, things around energy management, things about entrepreneurship, concepts around inevitability, to a degree, the law of attraction and gratitude in your life. And whether you believe in the law of attraction or not has less to do with it as it does acting on things that come your way. Um, Telling the personal stories throughout that I think will resonate and really ground a lot of these different concepts so that people can take them away. And that really does come back
The
to the
personal
life,
stories were your stories or
my stories.
your stories? Okay.
Yeah,
All right. Mm-hmm.
yeah. So, I'll mention one for example, and it's pretty serious, which is that in my mid 20s, there was something wrong with my mom, and she was clearly not herself, and we were called. I'm the youngest of four. We were called together, with a family meeting with a professional therapist. We kind of bracing. We knew something was really coming, and it turned out that this was in the early 80s, received a tainted blood transfusion, and she contracted
Mm-hmm.
HIV.
Oh,
And over the course and to the reference of your introduction, the caregiver part, refers to the circumstance. And, in the later years, I mean, she really did get the worst of it. It's nothing like today. The miracle really of, what's been developed since, to prolong people's lives. Um, we thought we'd lose her, so many times.
Yeah.
And you'd have to go through that harrowing emotional experience, and then she'd pull through. And
Really?
after a while, you realize, well, what am I putting myself through that? I, what will be will be. That was really kind of what came out of that experience. And that's earned confidence. That's really, I mean, back to my late 20s, that's really what the foundation of earned confidence is. And so I'm able to bring these life experiences and tie
Mm-hmm.
them to these grounding concepts. And so important to me that a reader comes away from the book. And the Life Enrichment Action Plan is a 90-day step by step. I'm literally, walking them through in this later chapter called Winning the Battle Within, where I'm talking about, okay, this week or on a particular day, let's go and take inventory. Who are the spiders in your lives? What are your formative experiences, back to what you described, around earned confidence? And I just really put all of myself into it. And I, it's nice that the response has been so positive. And again, I feel like it stands apart because I, kind of wrote it in the bubble of my own experiences.
Yeah, that sounds good because, um, we all stand on something, whether it's our beliefs, whether it's something your grandmother told you, whether it's scripture, but we can also stand on life lessons, and that's basically what you're doing. You're saying these are Z-isms that you can stand on because there's principles involved in these Z-isms and life lessons. And you said one of them a minute ago. What will be will be. I think there's a song about that.
I'm sure.
Yeah, what will be, and it's true. And yeah, so these are definitely principles. It can be biblical, it could be life lessons, it could be personal experiences you're talking about, but you know there's nothing new under the sun. Another theism, right? Everything, something has always happened before, and you can use the lessons learned from something happening before. It doesn't even happen to be your personal experience, but someone living through it. Like you were talking about your mom being diagnosed with HIV. So someone reading that might be going through it at the same time and recognize, hey, she pulled through. It's nothing to worry about, whatever. So that was great. So they walk away with the fact that these are these life lessons, and you can be grounded in these Z-isms and principles and things like that. Awesome. All right. So I understand that you have a free tool for our listeners. So tell us about your free gift
Sure.
and tell our listeners how they can get a copy of your book. And also, this is your time to plug your podcast. Talk about it.
Thank you. Thanks so much. Well, one of the tools, again, there being a number of them throughout the book, is
Mhm.
called the self-care report card.
Okay.
And, in addition to addressing mood health, certainly there are all the best practices around physical health. And again, I'm, not necessarily putting myself forth as the, expert nutritionist or, physical fitness instructor or anything like that, but
You
certainly learned a
played
lot of that.
hockey, so you know a little bit.
I know a thing or two about it, and certainly doing my homework for the book,
Right.
developed this algorithm around something to make it very simple for someone to keep themselves accountable around best practices in self-care.
Mm,
And the website is mattzinman.com, and there they'll be able to find the self-care report card. There's actually a page that we just put up as well, that talks about mood health. There's a solo episode from the podcast, which is called Insights to Live By, that's on that page. And then, the nice thing is, with the podcast, right, you get to have all these different kinds of guests that you get to have on and talk
great.
about the things that matter to you.
Hmm.
And it was about a month and a half ago, was Suicide Prevention Awareness Month. And I had a doctor on from National Institute of Mental Health, and we talked about suicide. And particularly, she's a pediatric doctor. So it was, how do you talk to your kids about suicide? What is that? We role played. And so that's something that we, featuring on a special page of the site, along with, different resources, the suicide hotline, all those different things there, so that anyone who's interested or is contending with some kind of mental health event, or someone in, who they love is, Myrna, I also want to mention one thing. I know it's reaching back uh, in this topic, but it's just too important that if there's any silver lining around COVID, uh,
Mm,
where in relation to mental health, it's that telehealth is now a lot more accessible. Where,
mm,
if someone was really suffering in silence, they would otherwise, I'm not going to go see some, head doctor and
mm,
lie on some couch, right? Where that
mm.
proverbial cliche goes. You can literally pick up the phone and get on a Zoom or what have you, and get a checkup. And I think, so many people, especially men, um, are suffering in silence, and I think that really, um, reduces the barrier for anyone to get help. And I encourage anyone who feels that way or knows someone who may be feeling that way to reach out. Um, my book is, Z-isms, Insights to Live By. You can read the first part of it both on the website and on Amazon. Of course, the podcast, Insights to Live By, is free. I do the solo and guest episodes. I'm really loving it, I have to say.
You're loving it.
I love doing the podcast. I hadn't really
Me
planned
too.
on it. It just
Yes,
kind of
yes,
happened.
yes, yes.
Yeah. So, um,
So your format is you have solo episodes where you talk about things in the book, and then you bring on guests to
yeah,
talk about things around the concept.
yeah, it varies. I mean, the solo
Okay.
episodes, there, I came out of the gate, I did like 20 something episodes in 60 days. And, thank goodness I'm now slowing down. It's one a week, and I'm alternating
Right.
solo and guest episodes. And
Right.
yes, I'll also do episodes having to do with my expertise around internships and career planning and things.
Okay.
So I did one last week on how employers can have interns even if you're an entrepreneur, and do
Hmm.
that virtually. And I'll probably do another one around that as well. And then I'm gonna continue and do refer back to the book on the
Okay.
solo shows.
Well, that's good. Yes, I am. I just started doing solo episodes again. I started it maybe a couple years ago when I didn't have a lot of guests. So I thought, hey, you know what, let me fill the spot with some coaching. But then I had so many guests that I stopped doing it. But I just started back actually last month, doing a solo episode a month. So
It's great.
that's what,
I
yeah,
think it might be
right.
where I'll head eventually. Solo episodes are a lot more work. At least I find.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I'm seeing the competition doing it too. All the big guys, they do have solo episodes because that is how your audience get to know you and know your concepts and things like that. So that's why I started back doing it. You got to learn from the best.
One can only try, or constant improvement for sure.
Yeah, so that's definitely me. So, Matt, yes, this was a really great conversation. Of course, you're a podcaster, so it was easier. It was easy for us to flow and easier to talk. And I love the concept of your book because it sounds like it's a self-help book, using life lessons and Z-isms too. And I love your word. It's what is it? A life, sorry, a life enrichment action plan
Right.
and your self-care report card. Those are two big things that definitely, um, uh, you know, somebody that's wanting to enrich their lives, whether it's through gratitude or through confidence or through mood enhancements or, you know, um, quotes that you can stand by. I think it's a great concept, great book. And of
Thank
course,
you.
we didn't touch on the entrepreneurship part of it, but there's, I guess you do have a chapter on entrepreneurship in there.
Yeah, we can't give away the whole book, Myrna.
I
Right? We
know,
covered
but
some good
yes,
things.
right.
I'd say
Mhm.
the areas in and around heightening mindfulness, things around swimming with the current, having some
Okay.
fun around coincidences, making
Right.
coincidences
Nice.
matter,
Nice.
getting into gratitude, the law of attraction, and then something called inevitability around how do you take the principles and apply that to something effortful, like entrepreneurship. Companies don't
Okay.
start themselves, right? Books don't write themselves, but
Right. Right. Right.
how do you do that in that way, and then that flows into being a
Nice.
life athlete, winning the battle within. So
Nice.
um, anyone who just wants to check out the book, and again, you can read the first part for free, and you'll know if you want to keep
Okay.
going. So I really
Awesome.
appreciate it. Thank
I
you.
love it. I love it. I love it. All right. Well, listen, thank you so much for coming on my podcast and talking about your book and your podcast, Insights to Live By. So I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Pleasure.
I want to thank you, the listeners, for staying with us till the end. And I hope you would support Matt, and if you are a regular listener, you know that I will have a transcript of our conversation on the show page, which is blog.myhelps.us. So you can head there, and you'll also get the links to Matt's website. He said his website very quickly, mattzinman.com. But we'll I'll have the link there to his website and to his podcast and a transcript of our conversation. Want to remind you that if you're listening to this on iTunes, that I would love for you to not only subscribe but rate and review the podcast. I try to bring you guests like Math every week that would change your mindset so that you can transform your mindset so that you can transform your life. So definitely give us a little thumbs up. As also started putting some emphasis on my YouTube channel. This conversation is on YouTube Live, so you can go on and watch us instead of listening to us. And of course, I would love for you to subscribe as well. Um, so also, I do have a life coaching group on Facebook that is growing by leaps and bounds. And on that group, I share inspirational messages and quotes, something, maybe like Matt's Z-isms.
We all have Z-isms. We all have insights to live by.
That's right. Exactly. Exactly. That's exactly what I do. Insights to live by, words of wisdom, whatever you want to call it. So I invite you to join my Facebook group and be inspired through the week. So yes, so just thank you guys for tuning in. Matt, any last words?
No, thank you, Coach Myrna. Thanks to your audience, and everyone. Just remember, be nothing less than kind to yourself.
Yes, yes. Self-kindness. That's the new word. So until next time, namaste.
Namaste.